We do it because we think it's absolutely essential to the infrastructure of the United States. When COVID happened and so forth, everybody was concerned whether we had to shut down or not. And I reminded everybody at Preferred that we have the equipment at CDC down in Washington. We have the equipment at NIH, and many of those. So I think if the term essential is to be used, a lot of military bases, sure, and stuff like that. So we like to think of ourselves as an essential part of the infrastructure of the country, and not everybody can do it.
A quick interruption to remind you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better. Hey, it's Ari Santiago, President, CEO of IT Direct. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Made in America podcast. Today, I'm with David Bohn, President and CEO of Preferred Utilities Manufacturing Corporation right here in Connecticut, as all of our guests. Very excited to hear about Dave, his family business, and the exciting things they're doing in the energy sector. David, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having us.
Well, listen, man, it's the Made in America podcast, so we always start off with the same two questions. What do you make, and why do you make it?
We manufacture industrial combustion equipment for district heating plants, which would be hospitals, universities, large office campuses, whether public or private. Really, we think of ourselves as an engineering company that manufactures products. So why do we do it? We do it because we think it's absolutely essential to the infrastructure of the United States. When COVID happened and so forth, everybody was concerned whether we had to shut down or not. And I reminded everybody at Preferred that we have the equipment at CDC down in Washington. We have the equipment at NIH, and many of those. So I think if the term essential is to be used, a lot of military bases, sure, and stuff like that. So we like to think of ourselves as an essential part of the infrastructure of the country, and not everybody can do it. So
no doubt about it. And you guys have been doing it for a long time. So I do like to talk about the what. But before we get into the what, let's just dig into that why. So I know it's you're third generation family in the business. Talk about that. How did you get into the business? When did you develop your passion for manufacturing?
Well, that's a very interesting story. I don't know if you've seen the movie A Wonderful Life.
Yes.
But that's kind of my career path. So I grew up in Reading, Connecticut, and the factory in Danbury was built in 1947. Our first factory in 1920 was down in Long Island, and our headquarters was in Times Square, New York. Oh. And we moved manufacturing up in 47. We moved the engineering and general administrative and headquarters up in 65. And I grew up never wanting to work for Preferred Utilities.
Such a common theme, but
it was just one of those things where there was a lot of metal fabrication. There was when I was very young, I think we made our last boiler in 1972. Okay. And we got out of the boiler business at that time. We stayed in the kind of the technology end of it, the controls, the burners, and the fuel handling systems. But it was just one of those things. I just never had an interest in it.
Did you work in the summers, school breaks?
No, I didn't even do that. I was interested in kind of waiting on tables and
being in front of people.
Yeah, that type of thing. My interests were always literature, history, writing. Those were not. I didn't see the compatibility of those with turning out tube sheets and those types of things. So I just never anticipated. I informed my father at several points that I wasn't going to do it, and but it all turned on an event. My dad, the Preferred was a publicly held company. It was private in 1920. It went public in 1946. 1945-46 to build the modern factory in Danbury, Connecticut. And then my dad brought it private again in a leveraged buyout in 1986, which is the year before I was going to graduate from college with a history, an English and classics degree from Hamilton College.
not exactly your traditional path into manufacturing.
Right. So at that time, my dad did the leverage buyout, and he had a very, very serious heart attack. And I, just felt at that point that the right thing to do. I mean, it was one of those things where you know the right thing to do, but you don't want to do it. And so I just offered that to my father, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing? Don't change. Look at what Preferred did to me." as we were sitting together in the hospital room at Danbury Hospital, look at what the company did to me. Do you want to end up like this? And I said, "Dad, the right thing to do is I'll give up on, these ideas of political science, law school, writing, and not forever. Doesn't have to be forever, and I'll just come in and we'll do what needs to be done and get the company ready to sell," which is really what he was doing with the leverage buyout, is bringing it private and then flipping it, really, because none of my siblings were interested in it either. So I got involved, and it was just, one of those roller coaster rides. So I came in to my first job was to clean up 600 gallons. It was supposedly 600 gallons of number 6 oil, which if you mix rocks, small rocks with 6 oil, you get asphalt. And there was no way it was 600 gallons. It had to be a couple thousand gallons at least. So that was my first job in. And then
they figured, get you in, have you clean up the couple thousand gallons of asphalt. No chance you're going to want to go anywhere else. This is really going to suck him right in.
Right. Yeah. I had to submit an expense report for a new pair of sneakers because the 6 oil dissolved the soles of my sneakers. Anyhow, I did that. I got out there in the factory. I was testing anti-siphon valves. I was doing stuff like that. Then my dad wanted all the literature redone in the company,
like the cell sheet, stuff like that.
Yeah, and do the next catalog. We're up to catalog 25 here on the desk. I think I did catalog 19, and redo the branding and so forth. And he thought, hey, we can use some of that English major stuff that you
get some ROI on that college investment.
Right. And so it was the beginning of desktop publishing. I bought a couple of Macs. I wish I still had them right now in pristine condition, and laser printer, and went through all the literature, updated it, and kind of started the marketing department. We didn't really have one before, but that kind of was the genesis of the marketing department at Preferred. And then, there was these series of needs. One of them was in our Metropolitan New York office. So I got shipped down there for a year. Summer of 80, 88, 89, which is, I think, still has the record for the heat. Yeah. And that's where I understood that, sweating through the knot in your tie was something that actually could happen. But I was out pounding the pavement as a salesman. And then there was, an emergency, and New England. So then I went up there, and I was the district sales manager for 7 years up in out of our Boston office. And then I got a call in the spring of '94, and my dad was very concerned about the health of two of our top guys, our treasurer and our executive vice president, secretary treasurer and executive vice president. And it was good instincts on his part, because we lost both of them within about a year and a half from that point. And he asked me to come down, and so he had really moved me all around at this point.
Really giving you like a flavor for, I mean, literally, right? I mean, you're in there cleaning oil, you're selling, you're running stuff. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, I skipped over order entry. That was that was like a little bit of purgatory, if there is such a thing. But I was at that point I was reticent, because I had really come to a different place in my life at that point. The common term, I was born again.
Right.
I found the Lord, I got saved, and I really wanted my family to be centered around our church in New Hampshire. And so I told my dad, Dad, you can't do this to me again. And he said, and he didn't have a full understanding of what was going on at that point in my life, and how that could come into conflict with a obvious professional move.
Right.
And so I said, well, if you insist, I'll pray about it. And the Bible says that the church is the pillar and ground of the truth. So I'll go to the people of the church, in my church, and I'll ask them, and what the leadership says, I'll do. And so Dad was said kind of begrudgingly, get back to me on that. And
Ben wrote some quick letters to the leaders of the church, and they're like, right. My son's coming over. Let me tell you how this is going to go down.
Right. And, it's funny, because when I said those things, I was really convinced that I knew what God's will was. I think we're all like that. It shows really how shallow our faith is. And I believed it was that I was going to stay in New Hampshire, but I ended up doing this. I prayed for a week, and I went to the leadership of the church and talked to the people, and the pastor asked to have a meeting with me. And he in the meeting, the first thing he did is he took out the shoebox on the table, and he opened it up, and in there, and this is 1994, in there was all this demographics for Connecticut, not only Connecticut, but Danbury, Newtown, Brookfield, Ridgefield, Easton, Reading. And I said, what is this? The populations, these maps and stuff. And he said, listen, I did this work in 1981, 82. I drive down from New Hampshire on Mondays, do this work in the Brookfield, Connecticut library. And I really have always felt that we needed to start a church down in that area of Connecticut, just an independent Bible church. And we weren't denominational. We aren't denominational. And I just knew this was going in a bad direction, because I had assured my wife, we're not moving.
But here we go, and we're getting ready.
Yeah. And so the pastor said, listen, I've done this work, and this is what I wanted to do, but it just never worked out. But I think this is the move. I think you should go down there. And I said, I'm not a pastor. I'm a nothing, And he says, he said, well, I didn't tell you had to be the pastor. I just said, go down and start the church. And, you've been to all these training sessions. You've been running our Christian camps. You've been involved with the kids here. And, I wouldn't even say it if I didn't think that you could do it. And we'll worry about getting a pastor later.
So when did you end up moving down?
So I called my dad, and of course, when you give that kind of guy a green light, he's like, you're down here.
Yeah.
So I actually commuted on Mondays. I'd drive down on Monday morning. I'd get up at 3:00 in Salem, New Hampshire, drive down, and I stayed with my sister during the week, who lived in Newtown, and I'd come home on Friday nights, and I did that for 3 or 4 months until I was able to rent a house, and then moved my wife, Missy, and our one child, and she was great with child, and our second one. And we have a girl, Ruth, and then 4 boys, Robert, Chris, Richard, and Charlie. And we moved down, and it was about a year later we started the church and so forth. I had to tell Dad, listen, here's the deal.
Right.
You know, it's a yes, but the first thing is to start a church in Reading. And
so at what point in this journey did you realize that you really had a passion for Preferred? Because now you've been there for quite a number of years. You know, you seem like a guy that's really into it. When did that light switch on for you that it was like, this is going from I'm helping my dad to I'm doing this role to like, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, it was during the time up in Boston. And, you know, I could say a lot of things that would probably make me look better, but it's when you find out that you're good at something,
Mm-hmm.
I think that you start having a passion for it.
Mm-hmm.
When you see that you can take a situation where perhaps there's a group of people and they can't see the best way to go, and then you're able to present that in a way that changes minds, and you see how it works out, and everybody's happy. I mean, that makes you happy.
Yeah, sure does.
And so I really think that it in that Boston time period, the Boston office time period, is when all of a sudden I realized I was good at what I was doing.
Was there a moment, or was it just a series of many moments?
It was a series of many moments. I'd have to say. I mean, I think the thing that the job that broke the ice was a large job at Beth Israel Hospital in Boston. When I landed it, and right then too, there was another job at Northeastern
Mm-hmm.
University. And when I landed those 2 jobs and I wrote them all up and I sent them down, the reaction of the upper echelon down in Danbury was like, how did you get these orders? You know, and and coming in as the boss's son, I was, people were harder on me. I think, and a little bit unfair, but that was good for me. Sure. in every way, because it kind of drove me on to not quit, and that I had to be successful.
Sure. Because
everybody was looking for the boss's son to, you know, be a failure,
right?
Kind of deal. So yeah, I mean, that's really when it switched on. But
everyone's going to get behind you, right? Because everybody loves a good sales guy, right? Everyone. No, I mean, right. Like, listen, at the end of the day, somebody's got to bring in the business. And I think that's just such an important part, right, of every single business. I just want to ask a couple questions about the what. So, I mean, I think when people think about utilities, and if people hear the name Preferred Utilities, you know, they think about like the power plants that power the you know, our light switches at home, and not so much of all the different power generation equipment that's at individual buildings, like you mentioned, at a hospital or at Northeastern. So maybe just talk a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, David, about just what you guys make specifically at Preferred, where we would see it in the real world.
Yeah, sure. So we do supply equipment to utility plants, and so Connecticut Light and Power, Eversource, really popular utility here in Connecticut, and so forth. That is not the bulk of what we do. We also supply nuclear outage equipment and services to utilities that have nuclear power plants. So there's that aspect of the company, and that represents a significant part of the company's revenue. The bulk is what we would call the industrial or heavy commercial power plant or boiler room application. And that is for a hospital. the boiler plant in a hospital, the boiler plant in a central plant for a university or a college, or for an office campus, and anywhere where you have a central or what's called district energy plant, a district energy plant serving multiple buildings, sending chilled and hot water out to buildings for heating and cooling, or sending steam and chilled water out for heating and cooling. New York City schools, for instance, the Board of Ed in New York City is the single largest owner of boilers in the world.
Is that right?
Yes.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And right behind it is the New York City Housing Authority. 1 out of 5 residents in New York live in New York City housing, which is kind of a sad thing, but they have they're the next major owners of a district heating plant.
And so do you guys make the boiler? So I own this little district heating thing,
yeah.
which is used to not really provide the lights, but to provide heating and cooling for large campuses.
Right.
So what do you guys make for that?
Yeah. So we, up until 1972, we made boilers. My grandfather, Gerald W. Bohn, was the designer of the first 4-pass downdraft Scotch Marine style boiler. I bet you didn't know that either.
Did not know that either. Yes.
Yeah. So he's a 1905 graduate of Purdue and mechanical engineer. And so we made that boiler from the mid 40s up through 1972. And then we stopped making boilers and just focused on the technology end of it, which was really a direction that my dad drove us in. And it was to focus on the technology of the burning equipment, the burners. And then we really went into controls. We started buying, we bought a division of General Controls. We bought a controls company called Rimcore Instruments. And that continued. I bought a small company out in Illinois called GN Electronics and so forth. So a lot of we focused on a lot of the technology end of the business, got away from bending metal in Danbury, Connecticut, because you can't afford to bend metal in Danbury, Connecticut and fight against doing that out in the Midwest somewhere or in some other place, in the world. So we focused on, preferred has always been the more expensive option because it's a more highly engineered product that is more capable. It's more rugged. We're replacing burners in New York City right now with the new preferred burner, ultra low NOx or low NOx burners that were put in 1948, 1952, 1962. And the school doesn't want to let go of them, because they were the reliable burners that could take the abuse and be reliable and efficient and so forth, versus the mass market burners that came out in the 70s, sheet metal, like all American stuff, right? We Americans want a deal on everything. We got to get it cheap, but we want it to have the same quality as the thing that's cost twice as much.
I heard somewhere you always get what you pay for, but
Yeah. So in any case, we just held the line on that.
Sure.
And so we don't make the most burners in the United States by a long shot, but we make a quality product that has a lot of longevity, and we build into it the ability to make enhancements later on, as opposed to change out a burner, because that's a big deal.
Right.
If you change out a burner, you got to get a permit, and that's bad enough, say in Danbury, Connecticut. But if you say New York City, that's like, now they're going to check your chimney, and you might, because you're changing the burner out, you're going to have to do a $2 million chimney retrofit. So we in the past, we built that in. We always like to say we've got a lot of engineering up our sleeve for our customers when their needs change. But in addition to that, today we do it particularly because emissions regulations are going to change.
Sure.
So why not put in a burner that's going to get you to low emissions, if that's what you want to do now, and then as the emissions regs change, that same burner can be adapted to meet even the most stringent emissions regulations in the country, which would be California, Houston, Washington State, and those types of places.
So kind of finding a new innovative way to kind of meet not just the needs of today, but the needs that we might even have tomorrow when it comes to.
For instance, in California, there was, the 25 years ago, there was a regulation change. Everybody had to change out their burners. A few years later, they changed it again. And California's not big on grandfather clauses. No. So everybody had to change their burners again. Well, everybody's on their 5th burner now in California. And one of the things that we wanted to do with our equipment was to give the customer assurance that they have that technology built into their burner. Yes, there are going to be some external changes. Yes, there are going to be some internal changes. There might be a controls change, but you're not going to have to go through a burner permit regulation change. You're going to be able to retrofit your burner.
So what kind of people work at Preferred now? What kind of jobs you guys have there? How much is like these engineering design jobs? Talk a little bit about what that looks like.
Man, we've got the best people in the world. I'm sure that you'd argue with me with your company and stuff like that. But
fortunately, we can both have the best because we have different people.
Yeah, so right. I mean, it's we're talking wonderful people in their character, but in terms of what type of person, it's the person whose adrenaline starts pouring into their bloodstream when they hear the words "that can't be done." And we've been able to build a group of people now, whether they're a mechanical engineering background, whether they're an electrical engineer, whether they're an electronics engineer or software engineer. Those are all the types of engineers we have. We have code writers. We have, English majors. The company's very biased against them, and I said they're not a protected class, but I'm the boss, so they are a protected class. So English majors. My daughter Ruth is an English major, English and music, and she's head of communications for us. So we have
this company's starting to have a long tradition of communications majors coming in and doing marketing communications work for you guys.
No, absolutely.
It's a requirement now of the job description.
It has to be, because engineers, they just can't seem to. They have such wonderful things in their minds.
That's right.
But they it's like they want to keep them a secret.
Yes. Or they want to give you way more than you need.
Right.
It's one or the other. Right. We're either too little or way too much.
Right.
Can't find that Goldilocks zone.
Right. So we have and then we have wiremen.
Yep.
Licensed electricians. We've got pipe fitters. We have welders. We have metal fabricators and programmers. So it's a
pretty wide ranging group.
Yeah. There's Preferred Utilities is structured like an old time company in the number of products that we manufacture and support. Most companies, modern companies, have pared down their product offering to just a few things. And they want to mass produce them, and they want to, keep the business model as simple as possible, because the American consumer needs cheap prices, but they want quality equipment.
Right.
We support an array. I mean, the book that's standing there, Catalog 25, and we have a new Catalog 26 coming out later in the winter. That book's an inch or so thick, and the those are all products that we support. So that's where you need the depth. And we are a company that supports that many products because we want to offer total solutions for our customers. And we don't want them to have to sacrifice.
How do you manage the complexity? You know, and there's other people out there listening who have thought about the simplicity conversation that you had, maybe not just on price, but just on like sheer management sanity, to try and keep it all straight. How have you guys sort of cracked the code on being able to give the variations? Because certainly customers always want to be able to do it 16 different ways. How do you guys manage to keep the complexity but manage it well? What's like the secret to that?
The secret sauce to that is to have a real engineering group within the company that has diverse backgrounds in these things, and that's what's been eliminated. Because if you looked at our financials, you would see that is a gigantic cost.
And this is where we're talking about the mechanical engineers, the electrical engineers, like having that full sort of deep bench of talent. Yeah, of course, that's going to drive costs.
Yeah. And so, people just don't want to do that, because what happens in a downturn? Well, you got to let engineers go.
Right.
And then when business picks up and you got to bring them back.
Yeah.
But guess what? You lost so much tribal knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And what Preferred has been able to do, because of our diversity, is we've diversified, and we do have this, I would call it a weakness in overhead. We're overhead heavy. And we've gone through downturns in the past, but we retain our people so that they have this tribal knowledge, they have the technical knowledge. We've tried to get much better about documentation and all of that stuff, and we have. But when you lose a person, you lose all kinds of context.
Yeah, documentation can never make up for something.
And it's not. Now, it can be, you could do the best you possibly can, but it can't make up for that person. Yeah. And so what we've done is we diversified strategically into different product lines that are, we call it within our hedgehog, principle. They're all associated, but they do live in different markets. The nuclear market isn't necessarily going to be down if the boiler market is down. So the fuel handling market, which is driven by emergency generators, we haven't even talked about that, but what we do is we supply fuel handling systems for diesel backup generators. And that just, it became important in 1990, real important, 1988 when I moved to Boston. The fuel systems for emergency generators were all handcrafted a piece at a time by contractors. What Preferred did at that time, and the Boston office pioneered in, was to package the entire system. Like the generator was packaged, the fuel system was packaged now, and all pre-engineered. So we've done that. So when the boiler market is down, the emergency generator market might not be down.
So the offset to the extra overhead and complexity is the ability to do so many different things.
Yeah. And, prior to the last election, we had like the triple whammy. We were going into an election year. Our business is so conservative. Everybody just kind of shuts down. Yeah. We had oil dropped from $100 a barrel down to $30 a barrel. That's really bad for us. Okay. We want,
higher oil prices.
Yeah. We want $4 gasoline. Okay. Right. At the pump. So, did I just say that on the air?
I was going to say half my audience just disconnected, but go ahead.
Right. But in any case, it's a dynamic, and we're getting more and more disconnected from that. But the fact is that and then we had a recession. We had an economic recession, and getting back to the most wonderful people in the world. I basically went to everybody. I said, I don't want anybody to leave this company. So, the executives, the people on the board of directors are going to take a 30% pay cut. The executives of the company are going to take a 20% pay cut, and the rank and file need to take a 10%. And there was immediate, not only just buy-in, but like people kind of coming and putting their hand on my shoulder and saying, it's going to be okay, Dave, it's going to be all right. And so forth. And we just sucked it up. And as a company went through, and then, we brought the rank and file people on back up first, and then the managers, and then the board last. And
I think that speaks volumes about what it seems like the culture is at Preferred. Can you talk a little bit about how you think about kind of the work culture, what it's like to work at Preferred, and how you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I can only speak from my personal experience, and then what I want to create, what I would want to the type of company to work for if I didn't have control of those things. And getting back to something that we left off on, my move back to Connecticut was really driven by the fact that I'm going to start a church, and it's going to be, I want to be a blessing to the community of Reading and Danbury and that whole area of kind of lower Fairfield County. And that focus on the importance of atmosphere in a community, culture in a community, it served me very well as I applied those same principles to Preferred Utilities. And so a person wants to work in a place that's safe, and not safety isn't just, I don't think I'm going to get any physical damage. It isn't even necessarily, I don't want to get yelled at, but safety is much more than that. Safety is the feeling of belonging to something that is stable and consistent. So, anybody that's parenting a young child knows it's very difficult to be consistent in loving that child, consistent in disciplining that child, consistent in being there for that child. And we can't be there physically for everybody all the time. We're not God, but we can focus on being there at the right time. So at Preferred Utilities, the culture is really based around the other person being there for you. So you don't just finish your work that gets sent on to the next guy or the next gal. You finish your work in a way that takes into consideration how are they going to receive your work, and then what are they going to have to do with it, right? So consideration, thinking ahead about the next person, not thinking about yourself, and being a person that is more interested in giving than in taking. And, it's so simple to say these things, but to be, it's very difficult for me to consistently be that person, to hire people, to find people that agree with me on that.
That's so funny. I made a note to ask you about that, which is, so when you're thinking about the culture, because we've talked about this sort of a culture of excellence, a culture of diversity and skills, a culture of caring as much for the people and the people that work around you as you do for yourself. I'm paraphrasing, but I think that's fair to say. It's a lot of things you're trying to find. How do you go out and you're trying to find people to join what you call the best group of people in the world?
Yeah.
So it's a tall order. How do you recruit?
So I don't leave that to other people in the company. And so we're up at about 125 people now. Mm-hmm. I take a personal role in every hire. And I think I've been criticized by some of my peers for getting bogged down in the minutia, having it referred to as chicken manure, different word than manure.
Right.
And that I really need to be, looking over the bow, charting the course for the next 10 years, and these types of things. And there's no doubt about it. That's my responsibility.
Sure.
I mean, I have to maintain the vision of the company, and encourage the next generation to start developing the vision of the next 10 years. It can't all just be me, and this is one of the things that I think is so great about the next generation at Preferred is they have a vision. Now, whether I've been the one that's been able to inculcate that in them, or that I just have kept asking them for it, or whether I got the right people, I don't know any of that. But I do know that those are all important things, no doubt about it. And without those things, a company is not going to succeed. But if you do not have the right people in your company who are a cohesive part and believers in the culture, and they want to maintain it as much as I do, and they understand how special it is, then I think I've failed. And so
you're putting hiring people kind of in alignment with that. You're putting hiring people, making sure you have the right people on the bus, to use another good to great term. Yeah. We talked about hedgehog concept. Right. Right people on the bus is so important that in addition to your role of looking out over the bow, this merits your time. Yeah.
And it can't just be done. And it cannot be done. Hiring cannot be done when a job is needed. There's a job opening. So for instance, before my daughter was even in college, I was taking her around with me, look at colleges. One college that I focused in on, that had a good engineering department, we traveled. I think I started this 15 years ago. So what's the first thing? I got to get to know the faculty. I've got to get to know the dean of students. I've got to get to know the head of that department. I've got to I got to become friends with them. I have
developing the relationships to develop the pipeline of talent even before you have a need.
Right. So I developed. There's two schools that we work with. This is one, and I started 15 years ago. I've developed those relationships. I get the heads up on who the promising freshmen are. I will reach out to them, ask them. We have an internship program. We bought a townhouse right across the street from Preferred Utilities. That's where our interns stay during the summer. We bring them in. They probably don't come in their freshman year because freshmen don't really know what they want to do. So they might want to be a mechanical engineer, and then they realize what it's like. Or they don't want to be a graphics, they want to be a graphics design person. They don't realize what it's going to be like. So, but I start talking to them. I start interviewing them maybe their freshman year and their sophomore year. And then maybe their sophomore and junior year, they'll be at Preferred, living in the townhouse with other interns, which is another observational port. How do they get along with other people, and so forth. And how
do they treat somebody else's property?
They treat somebody else's property. Sure. How do they leave it when they take off? What's their room look like? And so when we hire these people, we know them.
That's such a smart thing to do, and such like a tremendous investment, not just in the culture, but also in the output you're looking at for your customers, playing the long game on that investment, and must pay off because you're getting some people, you really know them. They're learning how to implement the skills at Preferred. So when they start, you're already a couple legs up.
Yeah, it's worked out great. The ball's rolling now. So, things have gotten a little bit easier to manage. I have a tremendous team of people. My daughter, people in the accounting office, are Bernadette Lindstrom and Cindy Clark, and then the department heads at Preferred are complete. I couldn't do it without them.
Right, right.
I'm the salesman.
That's right. You're the guy out there making it happen.
Right.
So as we're running out a little bit, we're coming to the end of our time. I just want to ask you a couple things. First, I want to ask you is about the next generation. So I know your daughter's involved in the business. You look still fit and healthy, so I assume she didn't have to come in when you were in the hospital. So it looks like Preferred has a future with the Bohn family continuing. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Our eldest, Ruth Bohn O'Donnell, is our communications person. My son, Robert, graduated with a mechanical engineering degree. And a couple of years ago, we bought a rep firm for the metropolitan New York area and Connecticut. And he's working at that firm now as a sales engineer. And then our next son, Christopher, graduated the year before last, and he's as a mechanical engineer. I don't know how all these mechanical.
I was going to say the whole thing's turned around. You were ready to go be an English professor and got sucked in. Apparently, they are looking at you and saying this thing looks amazing and coming in behind.
I think it's because I always told them, I'd come home and I'd say, hey, man, if I was an engineer, I could have done so much better, And so right.
So what's it like having your kids in the business? What does it feel like? What does it fill you with pride? When you think about that future and you get to work with them, what does that feel like?
I think part of it has to do with my relationship with each one of my kids. At some point in their life, I was their sports athletic coach of some sport, mostly soccer. The great transition from your child also becoming a peer and a friend and like one of the best friends you've ever had, because you share so much history together. I can't express how enjoyable it is. It's just, and then when they do something really smart, it's hard not to, I won't allow myself to brag on them, in the company, but, because I want people to like them. But is there anything better than that?
I can't imagine it.
Yeah.
No, dude, listen, I'm a long, long way off with my own kids, but I bet it must be a really special feeling. And there's so many, people in Connecticut, especially in manufacturing, who've had these multi-generational businesses. And it is just so special for just the ways that you just talked about. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I've had these moments with all of my kids that are working at the company. My son Richard is going for electrical engineering and computer science because he just has to be different. And he's a good friend of one of your newest employees here.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. I just walked in and found that out today.
Small world.
Yeah. And then Charlie, I don't know. I always tell my kids, you don't have to come to work at Preferred. Don't do it. If it isn't something that you're very passionate about. But I've had these moments with each one of the kids that has worked there, where we've had something really tough to work on together. And there's been a little friction, because I've created these strong-willed people that are very confident of themselves. And it's like, what have I done?
That's right.
But to work on a very difficult thing with somebody and have that same kind of, working through it together that you'd have with any employee, and then to come out and be successful together. It's sort of like being in the trench, trenches together.
Yep.
There's incoming,
sure, yeah.
And to have that experience with your own child and to be more of a comrade, than the parental figure, is fun. There's just nothing like it.
I love it. So before we get to rapid fire round, I want to ask you, you talked about early on in our conversation about community and getting engaged in the community through your church and otherwise. How do you carry forward community involvement now? I got to imagine somebody with your background, it's been consistent. We've seen great leaders, great business owners, great manufacturers in Connecticut don't just focus on their businesses, but outside their walls and in the community around them. I have a suspicion that you're no different and maybe even lead the way.
I'm a firm believer that you just have to be engaged now, whether that is just as a good neighbor or whether that is in our church community outreach. I mean, if I want to talk to you about the Lord and how important he is, shouldn't I have already helped you rake your lawn? Shouldn't I have helped you change your tire? And, shouldn't there be shouldn't we have a relationship of some kind, And that doesn't have to always be the case, but that's really what I want to strive for is I want to have a relationship with the people that God's put in my life, my community, my immediate neighborhood and so forth. So to that end, I was very involved with my kids' sports. I volunteered to be a coach in various aspects of that. And then so Reading Soccer Club, and we started a travel group, with the Reading Soccer Club years ago. Went on to coach at high school teams. Had tremendous fun with that, and then I was introduced to next door to us, actually in our backyard, is New Pond Farm Educational Center. And so this is a project, and I knew the lady that started this years ago in Reading, is to get inner city kids out into the country, milking cows, tilling ground, harvesting vegetables and preparing them for dinner. And and so that I am a huge supporter of that, to get those kids out. And then Children's Educational Opportunity Foundation, I really, CEO.org I'm very passionate about, and it provides 400 scholarships for kids that qualify at 200% of the poverty rate in Connecticut, and to go to the school of their choice. And we work with parents and schools, and we provide those scholarships, and to see the effect that to trace our scholars from kindergarten, up through middle school, and then high school, and then to have these kids that I would call the highest risk kids in Connecticut go on to college and be successful and get in on music scholarships and athletic scholarships, and
experience a whole different thing. And really
to go to these schools and to be able to sit down and read with these kids, and to interact with the parents that listen. It
makes an impact.
It does, and these parents are so dedicated, and for us to be able to give them the financial ability to get their kid into a safer environment, a better learning environment, and then see the impact that has had in the kids' lives. And by the way, for all manufacturers in Connecticut, this is the next generation of employees.
No question about it.
So, I mean, we could do it for altruistic reasons and for reasons of love and higher calling, but I mean,
helps us too.
It helps us.
Givers gain.
Yes.
It's funny. There's a tradition, in the tradition of my family, that says someone who has saved the one person, that's as if they've saved the entire world. And so to go out there and get someone an education and set their path for life on a whole new trajectory really can make a huge impact on them, their offspring and everything that comes from that. So it's tremendous work. I'm glad you had a chance to share that. Yeah. Dave, I'm going to flip us over to a rapid fire round of questions. You ready?
I think I am. Yeah.
All right, here we go.
All right.
Red Sox or Yankees?
Red Sox.
Yes. Starbucks or Dunkin'?
Dunkin'.
When you take time off, no COVID, staycation or exotic destination?
Oh, exotic destination.
Ooh, where's the last exotic place you went?
Unfortunately, it was a long time ago, but Petite St. Vincent
Very nice.
in the Grenadines. In the Grenadines.
There you go. iPhone or Android?
Android.
Sports car or SUV?
I have both.
Nah.
That's my answer.
Both. I like it. Do you have a favorite business book?
I like Good to Great. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a very good book. If you could do anything, and you had to, other than be president and CEO of Preferred Utilities Manufacturing Corporation, what would you do?
I'd write.
You'd write.
Yeah.
Back to the roots. What's one thing, Dave, that you learned early in your career or early in your life that you think really springboarded you to the success that you've had?
I was a special ed kid and got pulled out of regular classes in 3rd grade in the Reading public school system. And Rosalie Saul, my special ed teacher, saw that I was really discouraged with my reading difficulties and how I couldn't get good grades. And she pointed out because I had to miss part of recess to be in special ed. And she pointed out there and she said, you see that kid out there kicking the ball and throwing the ball? He can't. I've watched you and like, it's so easy for you. And look at him. He's having trouble. And if he wanted to be as good as you, what would he have to do? He'd have to work. That man needs some work. And she said, that's what you're going to have to do academically. You have to outwork your classmates. So it's work.
Work. She got you into the work. That's
Yeah.
pretty nice. What's one thing, Dave, you learned later in your career, later in your life, that you wish you could go back and tell young David, and if he'd listen to you, make a really positive impact on his life?
I wish I could go back and tell my younger self to be less judgmental and kinder.
Kindness. Definitely can't lose by having more kindness.
No.
Listen, it has been a pleasure having you on today, David. Thank you so much for coming, sharing your experiences and your views. It's been a pleasure.
It's been great to get to meet you. Thank you.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by IT Direct.
As always, thank you so much for tuning in and spending some time with me today. You know, my goal is to help build a community where we can learn and grow together. Your input, feedback, and engagement is critical to making that happen. Please do comment, like, and subscribe so more and more people can hear what we're doing and join our community of growth and success. Thanks so much for tuning in. Talk to you again soon.